Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. So today I have a lightsaber build for y'all along with a lightsaber review. Now, review is going to happen while showcasing the build itself, but I'm going to let y'all know I have 20 completions and I still do not have the Taken Crystal. So at this point, I do have a god roll, the auto rifle that I wanted, the solar auto rifle with attrition orbs and burning ambition, and it's a tier 5. Even though the tier 5 aspect of the weapons don't matter if the origin trait isn't super good. And with the dungeons case specifically, the origin trait is not good for a player like myself, because I play in a lot of solo type deals now, and the origin trait, all it does is just all you get is bonus stuff while being near other people, and that just doesn't happen often enough for me. And then I have the LMG, which is a tier 4 with attrition orbs and jolting feedback. That is going to be featured in a different build video. But I didn't want to use Strand. I did not want to use Strand because, that's the easy way to go for Titan. So, and Strand does not rely on you using a Strand-specific weapon as much as Arc does. I originally wanted to use it on Arc, but it's just impossible without this weapon, without the lightsaber being able to swap elements. Now, for the lightsaber specifically, I'm using the green crystal. Just while I'm here, the red comes from invasions. Obviously, these tell you what they're on, where they come from. High level contracts, I'm not completely sure about this one, but as you can see, because I have most of them locked. These three are Eververse, unfortunately. Yellow will come from the new order system. When you get an exotic order, it'll drop the exotic crystal. Then obviously the next one comes from the dungeon. And same with these, different healths. Now, I am using offensive form. You don't necessarily need this. You can use balanced form. Along with offensive form, I am using grip so that there is some semblance of that I can guard at least a little bit. If you are using balanced form, for instance, I would likely have forceful blade instead. And then for our core, we are actually using the gyro core because this drops from the dungeon. It is pretty good. However, obviously, you can use the impact core and melee damage when this weapon applies. So it will do it on the light attack. It will not do it on the heavy. Well, actually, I think it does do it on the heavy. But when you do the 3 lights and a heavy, it does. But throwing it is not as good. So I use a throw for weaken specifically. If you're using this on Strand Titan, I do recommend doing impact instead of throw damage. The reflection is something else. So this is available every so often. I would recommend hopping on a daily basis to check and see if it's available for sale in the Tharsis Outpost. But the throwing one is guaranteed from the dungeon, if I remember correctly. The catalyst we're using is grants health regeneration based on the number of targets hit by the thrown sword. This is the main reason why we're using the throwing version as well, is, for all of that jazz. Then obviously reflecting shots causes you to throw. The rest of these, I don't recommend using this one at all. This one can be pretty useful. This one's not that great either, but yeah, I'm using the one from the dungeon. Now, let's go ahead and talk about weapons and armor here. Weapons, you have to have a pulse rifle on. Or an SMG to handle overloads. Unless you decide to rock suppression grenades, but for this build, we don't have access to overload at all. We're using a rocket for our heavy. I will say, if you can get the Void crossbow for the heavy slot, I do recommend you use that instead. Using Folded Root. Folded Root comes from a Call to Arms event. This one comes from just doing whatever activity it drops from. But I do recommend using the Void crossbow in this slot because it is unstoppable because it's counted as a bow. So at least you can have unstop there. The lightsaber is naturally anti-barrier. So there is that. Now, in terms of our actual armor here, Super needs to be a primary stat. I'm going to talk a little bit more stats in a bit, but you have to have Kinetic Siphon on. Void Siphon, like Harmonic Siphon, is great too. If you can manage to rock the other two weapons as void. We are not, but because we're using our rocket launcher way more than a pulse rifle, we're basically only using our pulse rifle to stun champs. There's that. Gonna have a super font here. This is kind of the setup you kind of need. If you are struggling to get special ammo, you can put special ammo finder on here. But then, I have firepower. Firepower is pretty good here. This is to help the rocket launcher out. This is strictly to help out the rocket launcher. You're not going to be building into your melee. You won't have access to your melee, generally speaking, most of the time. So I do not recommend trying to, the problem with at least a lot of setups that involves, arms or whatever, they kind of rely on you having access to your melee or your grenade, because grenades are not going to kill as often as your melee will. There's a lot more ways to buff your melee, at least on Titan, than it is to buff your grenade, to the point where it can just kill off rip. So not having access to that does kind of neuter things a little bit. We're using one Lucent Blade is all you need, for the most part. We're using Charged Up. We will be able to have 5 stacks, but 4 is really kind of all you need. Then we're using Concussive Dampener. If you want to free this up for different, like sniper damage resist or something like that, you can do that, but you have to have one of the artifact things on. Then obviously we have Recuperation. Staying that shit on, even though it only gives you 15 HP per ore pickup, it's just nice to have. Then we're using Weapons Font. In my opinion, Weapons Font is more, even though Surge mods do a higher damage bonus, if I remember correctly. The reason being is we're using 2 different element types, and it's gonna buff it buffs special. It buffs all damage, not as much though, but it does do that, and weapon stat is not ridiculously high or anything. That's why it's really good. Also, getting ammo is a lot easier when you have a high weapon stat. Then we're using Kinetic Scavenger. That's just to help the lightsaber, make sure we can use that all the time. Then we're using Double Time Dilation and Powerful Attraction. That is it. Now, in terms of the actual armor, you are going to want Gunner Armor, because I believe it's... No, wait, no, that's not Super and Weapon. If I remember correctly, right? That's not Super and Weapon. Yeah, anyways. Now, here are the stats that are... Well, first of all, before I get into the stats, in terms of the artifact, the only ones we're really making use out of is Sword Storm combo for bigger, better damage. Graviton, this is the artifact mod you need to have if you're not going to have charged up on. This one doesn't matter as much on this. But we'll kind of get into it. This is more so an important thing for arc setups, and solar, because fire sprites and ionic traces are just flat out better than void breaches and whatnot. But that's besides the thing. Now we are going to make use of this final blows against weakened combatants grant you devour. However, we do have an alternative way to do devour, and defeating a weakened target spawns a track a projectile that weakens other targets. Is this super important? No, you can use something else if you want to do kinetic things or whatever. If you do want to handle unstops, you can use this. Because I'm pretty sure lightsaber can still do it, because I believe it's kind of a separate effect. So you can obviously change some mods around, but keep in mind, this setup does not really rely at all on the artifact. It barely relies on the artifact. The second build that I will have before Shadow Order comes out does rely a little bit on the artifact in order to survive. Now, in terms of actual stats, also, do keep in mind, we're using Doomfang Pauldrons. This is important for the stats. Keep in mind, with Doomfang Pauldrons, we are not going to be benefiting at all from the first half of the perk, but we are going to be benefiting from the second thing. Now, stat-wise, health. Have it wherever you want. Melee can be as low as possible. It can be as low as possible. Unless you are using the shield bash to handle overloads, you do need to have that a little bit higher. Grenade just needs to be at 70. Just needs to be at 70. Class can also be as low as possible. So for this setup, melee and class do not matter at all. You can have them as low as possible. Health also doesn't really matter as much. Grenade, you just need to have it 70. Because that is comparable to what the old cooldowns used to be. Now for super, your super needs to be as high as possible, because we are relying on our super for the most part. Again, we're using it for damage, for big boy damage. So, however, if you just want to use this as more of a support style super, Just have it at 100 and put the rest of your stat towards your weapon, so that the lightsaber is big boy buffed. Now we have a weapon stat of 90. I do recommend having this higher than 90. It should be your second highest stat. However, because we have this thing on, weapons font, I believe it kept it to 30, 20 or 30 or something like that. It is going to buff it. We're going to be at least 100, if not a little bit higher. So that is something to keep in mind. Also, you can, if you can just as well, because you don't need the ammo, you can double up on font mods here. You're not going to need the ammo. We'll just rock this setup because, you know, yeah. So I believe one font mod gives you 10 extra? Oh wait, no, I think it gives you 20, and then stack of 2 gives you 30. And the next stack, I think, gives you 35 or something like that. But yeah, it does. It's noticeable when you are pretty low. It's noticeable when you're pretty low. Now in terms of Void, Sentinel Shield, that's super we're using. We're not going to be guarding with it. We are not. The damage just isn't big enough to be losing whole person's DPS. Now, we are using Towering Barricade. Now, if you are new to the channel, I do not use this barricade at all, basically. But this one's kind of nice because you're not really going to be using your barricade as a whole. We are using Shield Throw. This is just so, in a panic situation, we can just swap weapon, Shield Throw for a quick little bit of overshield and a little bit of health, as we get into. And we're using Vortex Grenade, despite the base cooldown being quite long. Now, we are using Controlled Demolition and Offensive Bulwark. Now, keep in mind with Offensive Bulwark, you're really only going to be benefiting when you use the Shield Throw ability, but you're not going to be getting that often. You don't really need it for that. You're really using it for the second perk, being you gain an additional Shield Throw while in Sentinel Shield. It helps Doomfang Pauldrons last a lot longer. Now, Controlled Demolition. Controlled Demolition, hitting a target with a Void ability or Volatile Explosion makes them volatile. Further damage to a volatile target causes them to explode. Grants you and nearby allies health when volatile targets explode near you. This is for quite aggressive setups. You're going to want a Vortex Grenade close to you. When a Vortex Grenade close to you, it is going to give you a fat chunk of health back. Now, in terms of fragments, again, because of Bungie's changes, we're actually using some different ones. For one, we're using Echo of Harvest. Defeating a weakened target creates an Orb of Power and a Void Breach. This does result on some lightsaber kills getting 2 orbs to spawn instead of 1 when defeating a target, which is interesting. Then, because we don't need class, picking up a Void Breach or an Orb of Power grants Devour. It is about 5 or 6 seconds, I want to say. It's not super long amount of time, but obviously you can extend that stuff, and you get so many orbs and Void Breaches that like you can keep that up. And then obviously Final Blows when surrounded by combatants grant super energy. That is extremely helpful. If you do not want to have this, instead you can also, by the way, we are using Echo Remnants to make that Vortex Grenade last longer. If you're using Magnetic, I would probably swap it out for this so you have extra weapon and super. But this is the other one you can have. So that Devour has increased duration. You don't need it though. Just to be perfectly honest, you don't really need it. And then, of course, we're using the Bushido set. We are not benefiting that much from the 2-piece set, but we are benefiting from the 4-piece set. Sword Final Blows temporarily reduce incoming damage. Damaging targets with those weapons extend that effect. We're using a sword as our main weapon. And if you do have the crossbow, this does work with the crossbow as well. So that is something that's quite nice. Now, we are going to be doing Avalon because it's the only... It's one of the few activities that actually has a barrier and overloads. Because you can't handle that stuff so well. We are going to go into Grandmaster. I'm assuming that most of y'all are in Grandmaster. Y'all are in Grandmaster about. We're not going to be putting any buffs on or anything. Even though we really could. We're not going to put any of this stuff on either. I really like Promotion, but we'll go ahead. We'll do Chill Touch. We'll do Counterfeit. And I think that's all we will... I don't really like Solar. We will put on one of these. I don't like Threaded for this setup. I don't really care for Threaded in this setup. Actually, because these are more these are reward multipliers. Yeah, I think that's good. We're not going to be doing the whole thing. We're just going to be doing part of it. Also, I'm launching into this. Let me let y'all peep the fashion. Let me let y'all peep the fashion. I'm gonna let y'all peep that. There it is. The chest and the legs come from the dungeon. The helmet comes from Season of the Haunted. Is one of the ornaments. Obviously, even though this is Doomfang Pauldrons, you can change what exotic ornament you have on. So there's that. And then the mark is from the pre-ordering. Or getting the ultimate edition or something like that. Now, most of the time, you're not going to see me with the lightsaber out. Just because I prefer being in first person mode for a lot of parkour and whatnot. Now let's go ahead and talk about the lightsaber a little bit. After Mithrax is done yapping. We're done yapping up a storm. By the way, you do get bulk charge for this. It's actually quite a bit. As you see, we got 3 there. Though we are 25 under, the reason why we're doing this in Grandmaster Set Ultimate is hold up. I don't remember the passive. Woo! There it is. But I'm not expecting everyone to be at Ultimate tier yet, even though you could definitely do this in you could use this build in Ultimate tier. We can't just activate that, but we're not really going to. So the lightsaber. The lightsaber, in my opinion, is quite interesting because, at least in my opinion, the lightsaber is great on different Guardian classes, on different subclasses. Like for Titan, it's really only good on Strand, and it's pretty good on Void too. The problem is there are a lot of great Void exotics, especially for Titan. Like if I'm using Bubble, I'm just using Le Monarch. If I'm using most other things, I really am going to be using, like, Choir of One is just so good that is just going to be the flat out better option on Void. But on Strand, it's really good, not anything else. I will say the one class it's not good on, no matter the Guardian class, is Arc, because all it does is get Bolt Charge. I'm not completely sure about. As you can see, we clapping here. Woo! We're just gonna let ourselves heal a little bit. But never mind, we're not gonna let ourselves heal a little bit. Again, we mightily struggle against overloads. I do recommend using an SMG in this slot instead. I don't believe. Yeah, Central Shield is not. Oh yeah, I forgot. Our super lasts for ages. Oh, they changed the enemy type? We're actually gonna. Oh, I might actually have to change activities. We actually do. We can't deal with overloads effectively, so we are gonna have to change it, unfortunately. Okay, so now that we are kind of back where we were, first things first, I had to lower the master because it spawns double overloads. Double overloads for this build is really bad, really bad. It would be better to have unstops than double overloads, because they regen health so fast, and this build kind of relies on you being up close, and the damage is so extreme. It's just can't exactly use this build, so at least solo. Like, look how much damage I'm already taking. Okay, so at least with the setup, I can nuke it fast enough. And now, bada bing, bada boom, we have a little bit of health. Just doing a little bit of. We have to wait for our... Okay, hold on a second. Let me actually try to run out of super here. Because obviously we rally. Oh, you know what? Let me just stop. So we have square 2 diamond. Oh my god, I forgot how much damage everything does. Hey, you do gain a decent amount of health for, I have Avoid Breach. When Devour is fully built up, again, for some reason, it missed that point-blank range. I have to do it again. Beautiful, there's a little bit of health there. Beautiful, so 2 diamonds. Beautiful, we got a double. Just bring that up. Yeah, we just need diamond. And we already have super back, by the way. Do we really have one? Yeah, we have one more. We're gonna want to get rid of the little imp things. Yeah, we're only gonna be doing the first part of this activity. Yeah, we're gonna wanna... Bada bing, bada boom. Beautiful. Oh. Okay, so, is this build great? No. Is this build great? No. As y'all can kind of see, Vex are a very problematic enemy type. Because you have to be aggressive with the setup. You can't just do mechanics like most builds. Obviously, this is not my strongest Void build. I would say it's probably even worse than some other setups that I've used. On this channel, would I say this is the worst Void setup? Probably. Due to, I think Slayer's Fang was a little bit better. It was just, in order to get it to properly work, you really had to do some setup shenanigans. Now, you might be asking yourself, Authors, what's the point of even putting out this build video or whatnot? What is even the point of all of this? It's terrible solo. That's the thing with this build. However, if you're in like a random team or whatever, it can actually work quite well because this build mightily struggles with champions. And in the current sandbox, not struggling against champions of all things is quite rough. And the game punishes you mightily for being very close range. Now you might be asking yourself, well, how have you made Legend of Acreus to work? You know what I have access to that I don't when I'm wielding a lightsaber or a sword in general? Powered melee. Powered melee. Swords do not proc knockout. On Prismatic, I have knockout and I have shield throw. Also, I have things like suspend to stall enemies in place to help out with that as well. And I have a roll of Cresta Alpha, Spirit of Loopy, and Spirit of Ambient Leap. So, like, they're there. I will say, in my opinion, using this for unstop barrier combos instead of barrier overload is going to be superior. I just don't have a Void Crossbow. I don't even know how you're supposed to get it. It has a symbol for the season, so I'm assuming it might be a Grandmaster reward or something like that. But the crossbow is actually which you want to use in that heavy slot. And then I would personally recommend using Lotus Eater if you have an old Lotus Eater. If you do not have this, I would recommend using Word of Crota with Demolitionist destabilizing rounds. But honestly, any weapon with destabilizing rounds and Demolitionist or destabilizing and repulsor sprays is going to be pretty solid there. In my opinion, I would probably rock, if you want to use a weapon that's a little bit more beefy, I would probably use a fusion rifle here in this slot. I will say also, if you have this beauty, the sniper rifle with Withering Gaze on it, pretty good. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why not use the lightsaber as, your main... Why not, do the lightsaber as the main thing, quote unquote, or, what have you. And why use Doomfang Pauldrons? Sentinel Shield got buffed. Doomfang Pauldrons, pretty good. Pretty good. Right, Void as a whole struggles with its barrier types. Void does need a pass, in my opinion. It needs a pass because it's the way it's probably the worst subclass in terms of doing stunning champions with its respective subclass verbs. With Arc is probably the best because, first off, you can have a grenade that does both blind and jolt pretty easily. But jolting stuns overloads very easily, and blind unstops very easily. Solar ignitions unstops relatively easily, and a lot of classes can get access to that. Barrier is a little bit harder, but when Radiant's active, that shit is stunning barriers no matter what. Volatile rounds needs to last longer in order to benefit from the weapons being anti-barrier, and suppression, at least on Titan, there's really only a shoulder charge melee and there's suppressor grenade. Why do we not have any supers that have... Why can't Sentinel Shield have suppression baked into its melee strike? Even the final third hit should be a suppression strike. That's what it should be. Stasis has problems as well because it can only deal with one champion type, and that's overloads. Why the fuck can't it deal with unstops? They need to revert that change. And obviously, Strand can deal... Unraveling Rounds is not super reliable, necessarily, in my opinion, either. It has the same issue as as Volatile Rounds. And also, Volatile Rounds require a grenade kill. In order for Titans to get Volatile Rounds, and I think this is the case for all Guardian classes, you have to get a grenade kill. And on higher difficulties, that's just not that easy to do. And then on Strand, requires powered melee kills, but there are a lot more ways to buff melee over grenade, right? So, and then obviously you have Suspend, which is extremely easy. But that's Void's little issue. Now, if you remember, there used to be an old meta that involved a particular exotic and Sentinel Shield with Doomfang Pauldrons. It was a power weapon called Tractor Cannon. This thing was very, very potent. Very, very potent. Now, the thing is, it got nerfed. Tractor Cannon's weaken effect does last longer than the lightsaber's weaken effect does. So keep in mind, Tractor Cannon will last a lot longer for the super's duration than the lightsabers will. The lightsaber will run out pretty quickly. This is more so, if you're Titan, you want to use a lightsaber. Obviously, Strand is number one. I want you to choose Strand. By the way, fun fact, there are no Pinnacle Op activities where Barrier is primary and not Unstop. There's only one activity that is Barrier Overload, and that's Avalon. Because Encore has Unstops in it as well. So, yeah, Bungie, if you could do something about that, that would be fan-flipping-tastic. Anyways, though, on that note, though, thanks for tuning in here. It's the first build of the year. It's my first build in a while, so do forgive me. The next Titan build is going to be a lot more potent. Also, I have gotten one recently. I have gotten one of these recently. What the fuck? Dennis Mantler or some shit? Oh, I have it. Oh, I just got it. That's why. Damn, this is actually a pretty decent roll, but I would actually not recommend using destabilizing rounds with this. I would use Withering Gaze if it can roll with that. And I probably wouldn't do this either. I would have some sort of damage perk or reload perk on this weapon. But yeah, that is kind of funny. I just got it too because it was locked out for me in collections too, so I had never obtained it until now. As though, that note though, next build is going to be way more potent. It is also going to be quite a bit differently. But again, we're going to have access to our melee and grenade here, so just to give y'all a little bit of a preview, it is going to be on Arc. It's going to be a very, very good Arc build. And it will not involve an exotic weapon this time, necessarily. So on that note, though, thanks for tuning in. Let me know what y'all think of the build. Rate it from 1 through 10. If I were to do this for Void, I think it's about a 6. I think in general, in my opinion, it's like a 3 or 4. But this is the only way I'm using a lightsaber outside of Strand. On that note, though, thanks for tuning in. Lightsaber as a whole, I do think is a 6 or 7 out of 10. If it could swap element types, infinitely more useful, way better. It would be a 10 out of 10 exotic if it was just not kinetic and it could swap element types. But it would have to match your equipped super. But alas, can't have everything that we want. So that note, though, thanks for tuning in, and I will catch y'all on the flip side.